in the glittering, high-octane world of Manhattan's financial district, where glass towers scraped the sky and fortunes were made and lost in the blink of an eye. Anya Sharma was a quiet, almost invisible cog in the colossal machine of Ether Capital. Her existence was a stark contrast to the audacious headlines and the swaggering confidence that permeated the air on Wall Street. While the titans of finance dined at exclusive clubs and brokered deals worth billions, Anya rode the crowded 7 train from her modest apartment in Sunnyside, Queens, into the heart of the beast. Her daily routine a study in unremarked diligence. Her cubicle, one of dozens in the sprawling, brightly lit open-plan office, was a microcosm of her life, neat, organized, and largely anonymous. Her days were a relentless cycle of data entry, spreadsheet analysis, and the generation of basic market reports. Rows upon rows of meticulously organized numbers, flickering on her dual monitors, were her constant companions. The rhythmic click-clack of keyboards around her, punctuated by the occasional sharp ring of a phone or the hushed urgency of a whispered negotiation, formed the ambient soundtrack to her professional life. She was an analyst, by title, but her actual work often felt more akin to that of a digital librarian, cataloging information without ever truly engaging with its deeper meaning. Yet, beneath the surface of this unassuming routine, a quiet ambition simmered. Anya harbored a profound, almost spiritual fascination with market patterns. She saw them not just as abstract numerical sequences, but as living, breathing entities, possessing their own rhythms and predictive whispers. Her dream was to delve beyond the surface, to apply her intuitive analytical abilities to truly understand the complex ebb and flow of global finance, to discern the hidden currents that shaped economic tides. But in the rigid hierarchy of Ether Capital, such aspirations were relegated to quiet moments, scribbled in a worn leather-bound notebook she kept hidden beneath her desk. Evenings were a familiar echo of her workdays, her apartment. A compact one-bedroom with a perpetually humming refrigerator and a view limited to the fire escape and the brick wall of the adjacent building was her personal sanctuary. Dinner was often a simple affair, leftovers from a meal prep, or a hastily assembled salad eaten in silence at her small kitchen table. The only light often came from her laptop screen, its cool glow illuminating her face as she delved into complex financial models, not for work, but for her own insatiable curiosity. Sometimes, she would glance out her window, catching a distant glimmer of the Manhattan skyline, those towering structures housing the very big players whose decisions rippled across the lives of millions, including her own. The almost meditative quiet of her apartment was a stark contrast to the relentless churn of the markets, a space where she could truly listen to the whispers of data without interruption. Anya had few close friends, most of her college acquaintances having drifted away into more conventional social circles or the demanding embrace of Wall Street's social scene. She preferred the solitude, finding a strange comfort in the predictability of her own company. Her weekends were spent devouring academic papers on behavioral economics, experimenting with obscure statistical models, or simply walking through the quieter parts of her neighborhood, absorbing the diverse rhythms of everyday life, far removed from the high-stakes world she inhabited during the week. This quiet introspection, this deliberate choice of solitude, was not born of loneliness, but of a profound need for focus, for the undistracted space where her analytical mind could truly thrive. One particularly grueling Tuesday, just before the close of the trading day, a flurry of urgent emails descended upon the junior analyst team. A complex last-minute audit for a major hedge fund client had been pushed onto their plates, requiring an exhaustive cross-referencing of quarterly payroll data. Most analysts groaned, already planning their extended caffeine-fueled nights. Anya, however, simply squared her shoulders and began to dig in, her fingers flying across the keyboard with practiced speed. Hours bled into late evening. The office slowly emptied, the bright lights dimming to an economical hum. Anya was deep in the labyrinthine spreadsheets, her eyes scanning lines of minute figures, when a seemingly innocuous discrepancy snagged her attention. It was a single entry, buried deep within a massive payroll file, for a junior research assistant named Liam O'Connell. His quarterly bonus, a modest sum, appeared to be off by a few $100s, a clear underpayment. It was a tiny error, easily missed amidst the thousands of other calculations, and one that no automated system would flag, nor any senior analyst scrutinize. The kind of error that usually went unnoticed, quietly benefiting the company at the expense of an individual. Anya paused. Her first instinct, honed by months of working within Ether Capital's rigid corporate structure, was to flag it through the proper channels, submitting a detailed report to HR, knowing it would likely get buried in bureaucracy or dismissed as an insignificant rounding error. It was late. She was tired. And this was not her primary task. She could simply move on, complete her audit, and head home. Liam O'Connell was just a name on a spreadsheet, another anonymous face in the vast corporate sea. But then, a small, insistent voice in her head, the same quiet voice that urged her to delve deeper into market patterns, spoke. It wasn't about the amount, she realized, but the principle. Liam, like herself, was a low-level cog, often overlooked, rarely appreciated. This was his rightful earnings. It was a matter of fairness, a simple act of human decency in a world often devoid of it. She thought of her own tight budget, how a few $100s could make a real difference. Without a moment's hesitation, Anya opened a separate, secure, internal messaging window. She meticulously documented the discrepancy, attaching the relevant sections of the spreadsheet, and sent a direct anonymous message to the payroll department with a copy to Liam's direct manager. Her message was concise and factual, devoid of any accusatory tone, simply stating, "Review required for Liam O'Connell, payroll ID XXXXXX, potential underpayment identified for Q3 bonus. Supporting data attached." She didn't sign it, wanting no credit, only resolution. It was a small, almost undetectable act of quiet integrity, a save-the-cat moment that showcased her intrinsic sense of justice and compassion for the overlooked, a trait that would later define her larger battle. She closed the window, a faint sense of quiet satisfaction settling over her. She finished the audit, submitted her report, and finally packed up her bag. As she rode the subway home, the late-night car sparsely populated, she found herself thinking not of complex financial models, but of Liam O'Connell, a face she might not even recognize in the bustling hallways of Ether Capital, and the small, almost imperceptible way she had made his world a little fairer. Back in her apartment, as the city's distant hum provided a muted backdrop, Anya opened her worn leather-bound notebook. Its cover was softened by years of handling, its pages filled with neat, often cryptic handwriting, strange diagrams, and mathematical equations that looked alien to conventional finance. This was her true work, her secret passion. She flipped through pages, some filled with complex fractals, others with intuitive sketches of market sentiment curves, all attempting to capture the ephemeral, almost mystical, essence of market behavior. It was a repository of her observations, her hypotheses, her growing understanding of the market's underlying pulse. This notebook was a legacy from her grandfather, a brilliant but eccentric independent trader who had made and lost several small fortunes in the pre-digital age. He had possessed an uncanny, almost clairvoyant ability to predict market shifts, often dismissed as sheer luck or madness by the mainstream financial world. He never held a formal position, never published in academic journals, but his predictions, delivered with quiet confidence to a handful of bewildered family members, had often been eerily accurate. He had taught Anya, when she was a child, to listen to the market's breath, to see the unseen patterns in the seemingly random chaos. The biggest truths, he used to tell her, his eyes twinkling, are rarely shouted from the rooftops. Anya, they're whispered in the subtle shifts, the hidden currents. You just have to be quiet enough to hear them. He had given her the notebook shortly before he passed away, filled with his own initial observations, urging her to continue his work. "It's a gift, Anya," he had said, "but also a responsibility. Use it wisely. The notebook, with its enigmatic symbols and intuitive leaps of logic, was more than just a family heirloom. It was a subtle seed of mystery, hinting at a deeper, unconventional talent that lay dormant within Anya, waiting for the seismic shifts of the market to call it forth. She traced a complex spiral diagram on one page, a visual representation of a market bubble's inevitable burst, a pattern that she felt, deep in her bones, was beginning to manifest in the very real, very public world outside her quiet apartment. The quiet before the storm was drawing to a close, and Anya, the invisible analyst, was about to be drawn into its turbulent eye. The quiet hum of the servers in Ether Capital's data center was usually a comforting drone to Anya, a steady pulse in the financial world she navigated. But in the weeks following her anonymous act of kindness for Liam O'Connell, that hum began to feel increasingly discordant, a subtle disquiet mirroring the unease growing within her. Her routine tasks, once merely monotonous, now felt like a veil, obscuring a disturbing reality that only she seemed to perceive. The catalyst arrived, ironically, not with a bang, but with a promotion, albeit a temporary one. Her direct supervisor, a perpetually stressed mid-level manager named David Chen, had unexpectedly gone on medical leave. To Anya's astonishment, she was temporarily assigned to assist the senior analysts on the Perseus portfolio, one of Ether Capital's crown jewels. This portfolio was the brainchild and personal obsession of Elias Thorne, the CEO himself. Thorne was a titan of finance, a man whose name was synonymous with aggressive growth and ruthless efficiency. His office, a minimalist fortress of glass and steel on the top floor, was rumored to be where entire market sectors bent to his will. He was a Type A villain, driven by insatiable greed and an almost pathological need for control and recognition. The Perseus portfolio was Thorne's personal legacy project, a highly leveraged investment fund focused on emerging tech startups, many of which had inflated valuations fueled by speculative capital. Anya's task was to compile raw market data for the portfolio, a seemingly straightforward assignment. But as she delved into the numbers, her grandfather's voice, a quiet whisper from her memory, began to resonate. Listen to the market's breath. Anya. It always tells you where it's truly going, not where they want it to go. She noticed it first in the unusual correlations between seemingly disparate market segments. The tech stocks in the Perseus portfolio, while ostensibly independent, were moving in unnervingly synchronized patterns. Then, she observed the accelerating rate of private equity buyouts of failing startups, propping up their valuations just long enough for Ether Capital to offload them onto less suspecting investors. It was a house of cards, built not on fundamental value, but on manipulated data and speculative frenzy. Her intuitive, analytical mind, honed by years of quiet observation and her grandfather's unorthodox teachings, recognized the telltale signs a massive financial bubble was inflating, poised to burst with catastrophic force, and the Perseus portfolio was right at its epicenter. A knot of ice formed in Anya's stomach. This wasn't just abstract data. This was a looming disaster that threatened not only Ether Capital, but potentially millions of ordinary investors, pension funds, and everyday families whose savings were tied to the market's stability. The sheer scale of the potential fallout was terrifying. Her initial reaction was a powerful surge of internal conflict. Report this to whom Elias Thorne, the architect of this precarious structure, was unlikely to listen. Her immediate supervisors were too ingrained in the system, too fearful of challenging Thorne's vision. She could feel the enormous weight of corporate hierarchy pressing down on her, the invisible chains of protocol and unspoken loyalty that bound everyone at Ether Capital. She was a low-level analyst, a nobody. Who would believe her? She pictured her tiny apartment, her meager savings, the precariousness of her own employment. One false move, one unapproved warning, and her career, her very livelihood, could be extinguished. The desire to simply retreat, to bury herself back in the safe anonymity of her cubicle, was almost overwhelming. But then, The faces of ordinary people flashed in her mind. Liam O'Connell, whose small bonus she had fought for. The commuters on her train. Their faces etched with the daily grind. Their futures tied to abstract market forces. She thought of her grandfather, his quiet integrity, his unwavering belief in the truth of the numbers. His words echoed with renewed urgency. You can't back down, Anya, when you know something's wrong. Not when it truly matters. This wasn't just about Ether Capital's profits. It was about ethical responsibility, about protecting the vulnerable from the reckless machinations of the powerful. This deep-seated ethical drive, long dormant under the mundane routine, began to stir, slowly overcoming her fear. She began to work meticulously, compiling her findings. She created detailed, visually compelling charts and graphs, not just with Ether Capital's official metrics, but with her own proprietary predictive models derived from her grandfather's theories. She showed the accelerating divergence between stock prices and underlying asset values, the unsustainable growth trajectories, the telltale lagging indicators that screamed impending collapse. She even dared to include a simplified version of her grandfather's spiral model, illustrating the exponential growth of a bubble before its inevitable, sharp contraction. Her report was comprehensive, undeniable, and utterly devastating. She titled it simply, Urgent Market Instability Alert, Perseus Portfolio Risk Assessment. She knew she couldn't submit it through the usual, anonymous channels. This was too important. It needed to go directly to Elias Thorne, or at least, through the most direct route available to her. David Chen was her only option. Anya walked to Chen's temporary office, her report clutched in her hand. Chen, a man whose ambition was perpetually tempered by a healthy dose of self-preservation, initially listened with a semblance of genuine concern. He meticulously flipped through Anya's charts, his brow furrowing as he absorbed the grim predictions. He was momentarily swayed by the sheer statistical rigor and the clarity of her unconventional models. Anya, this is alarming, he admitted, his voice a low whisper. If even half of this is true, Thorne has placed us on a precipice. He knew the potential consequences, both for the firm and for his own career if he failed to act. For a fleeting moment, Anya saw a flicker of genuine concern in his eyes, a human response to the impending disaster. But that flicker quickly dimmed, replaced by a familiar flicker of fear and calculation. However, Chen continued, his voice regaining a cautious tone. This is highly unorthodox, Anya. These models, they're not standard. And Thorne, he doesn't tolerate dissent. Especially on Perseus. It's his baby. He's staked his reputation, even the firm's future, on its success. If I bring this to him directly, he'll see it as a direct challenge, not a warning. It is a warning, David. Anya urged, her voice trembling with the urgency of her conviction. Millions of people could lose everything. We have a moral obligation. Chen sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair. Moral obligation doesn't pay the bills, Anya, or keep Thorne happy. Look, I'll send it up, through the proper channels, but I can't vouch for it personally. It needs to come from you. He meant, I won't risk my neck for this. His initial sympathy was quickly retreating behind the impenetrable walls of corporate survival. He eventually submitted her report to Thorne, but with a carefully worded disclaimer that distanced himself from its radical conclusions. A day later, Anya received a curt, unsigned email from Thorne's executive assistant. Mr. Thorne has reviewed your market instability alert. He finds your analysis to be speculative and lacking in practical application. Your models are deemed inconsistent with Ether Capital's established methodologies. He advises you to focus on your assigned tasks and refrain from generating unfounded alarm. No further action will be taken. The rejection, so cold and dismissive, hit Anya with the force of a physical blow. It wasn't just her analysis being rejected, it was her very perception, her intuition, her grandfather's legacy being scoffed at. She imagined Thorne, sitting in his opulent office, barely glancing at her meticulously crafted report, dismissing it with a flick of his wrist, perhaps even a condescending laugh. His arrogance was a towering wall, impenetrable to truth. This was the point of no return. The automated message, devoid of any human empathy, sealed her fate. She could no longer retreat into the quiet anonymity of her cubicle. The weight of the impending market crash, the knowledge that she held the key to preventing it, but was being willfully ignored, settled onto her shoulders like a lead cloak. She was no longer just an analyst. She was a Cassandra, cursed with foresight and ignored by the powerful. Her ordinary life, defined by predictable routines and quiet aspirations, had shattered. The market, with its hidden currents and impending tsunami, had now become her personal battleground. She knew, with chilling certainty, that she had to find another way to expose the truth, even if it meant risking everything she had. The digital silence from Elias Thorne's office felt colder and more impenetrable than any spoken rejection. Anya's meticulously crafted report, her weeks of painstaking analysis, had been dismissed with a flick of a finger, deemed speculative and lacking in practical application. The words stung. Not just her professional pride, but her very core belief in the power of truth and data. Thorne's arrogance was a formidable shield, deflecting inconvenient realities. The next morning, the corporate atmosphere at Ether Capital felt heavier, almost suffocating. Anya was summoned to David Chen's temporary office, a small, glass-walled room that offered little privacy. Chen, looking even more stressed than usual, kept his gaze fixed on his desktop, avoiding Anya's eyes. "Anya," he began, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Mr. Thorne was displeased with your recent submission. Very displeased. He feels it demonstrated a lack of understanding of Ether's strategic vision." Anya's jaw tightened. "My analysis showed a clear and present danger. David, to Ether Capital, and to countless investors." Chen finally looked up, a flicker of something resembling pity in his eyes, quickly extinguished. "Look, I understand your conviction, but this isn't about conviction. Anya, it's about optics. Mr. Thorne has staked everything on the Perseus portfolio. He needs it to succeed, to appear to succeed, especially with the quarterly earnings report coming up." He paused, then delivered the blow, effective immediately. "Your temporary assignment to the Perseus portfolio is concluded. You'll be reassigned to the archives department. Your new duties will primarily involve digitizing historical financial records. It's a long-term project." The archives department. It was the corporate equivalent of Siberia, a place where careers went to die, populated by those deemed redundant or, more often, those who had somehow displeased a senior executive. It was a clear demotion, a punitive measure designed to isolate her, to bury her and her inconvenient truths beneath mountains of forgotten data. It was Harold Finch's playbook, now executed by Thorne. Anya felt a surge of cold fury, quickly followed by a chilling determination. This was not just a demotion. It was an attempt to silence her, to render her invisible once more. She understood Thorne's motive now. He wasn't just ignoring her. He was actively suppressing her, because her predictions, if true, would expose his reckless gambles and endanger his meticulously built empire. He was Type A, the villain driven by greed and a ruthless desire to maintain his image and wealth, even at the cost of catastrophic market collapse. She walked out of Chen's office, her head held high, the humiliation burning in her stomach. She spent the rest of the day clearing her cubicle, packing her meager personal effects into a single cardboard box. As she did so, she subtly, almost unconsciously, slipped her worn leather-bound notebook into her bag, not into the box. It was her intellectual lifeline, a private world where her true talents thrived, hidden from the sterile scrutiny of Ether Capital. The next morning found Anya amidst the dusty shelves and blinking servers of the archives. The silence there was profound, broken only by the whirring of old hard drives and the occasional rustle of ancient paper. It was a stark contrast to the vibrant, chaotic trading floor above. Here, she was truly alone, surrounded by the ghosts of past financial triumphs and failures. But solitude, for Anya, was often a crucible for clarity. She set up her new workstation, a lonely desk tucked away in a corner, far from any prying eyes. She plugged in her old laptop, a personal machine she brought from home, and began her new, tedious task, digitizing decades of financial reports, quarterly statements, and market analyses. It was in this solitary environment, amidst the detritus of financial history, that Anya's unique talent truly began to unveil itself, albeit in a constrained, almost accidental manner. While digitizing an obscure collection of dot-com-era stock reports, she stumbled upon a forgotten trove of raw, unfiltered market data from the late 1990s. This data, often considered too noisy or irrelevant for modern algorithms, held a fascination for Anya. Her grandfather had always emphasized the importance of historical context, of understanding the subtle echoes of past cycles. As she cross-referenced this old data with her own contemporary observations, a startling pattern emerged. It wasn't just a similar market bubble. It was an identical fractal pattern, a self-similar curve repeating across different timescales, different economic conditions. Her grandfather's spiral model, abstract in her notebook, suddenly took on a terrifying, concrete reality. The current market, particularly the tech sector favored by the Perseus portfolio, was mimicking, almost perfectly, the trajectory of the dot-com bust, but on an even grander, more leveraged scale. The signs were undeniable, screaming at her from the raw data that no one else bothered to look at. The collapse wasn't just coming, it was happening, unseen, beneath the surface. This was her involuntary revelation. She wasn't seeking attention. She was simply doing her assigned, seemingly mundane job. And the truth, naked and undeniable, presented itself. She began to compile her findings, not for Ether Capital, but for herself, driven by an urgent need to understand the full scope of the impending disaster. She created new, complex simulations, overlaying the historical fractal patterns onto current market data, predicting the exact timing and magnitude of the crash with chilling precision. One afternoon, as Anya was deeply engrossed in her work, a shadow fell across her desk. She looked up to see Evelyn Reed, a senior data analyst from the quantitative research department. Evelyn was known for her sharp intellect and an almost cynical detachment from corporate politics. She was a helper, though she wouldn't admit it, burdened by a deep-seated suspicion of grand pronouncements and a meticulous eye for factual discrepancies. She usually confined herself to the rarefied air of the quantitative labs, far from the archives. "Chen told me you were exiled to the digital graveyard," Evelyn said, her voice dry, a hint of curiosity in her tone. "Just checking to see if you've gone mad yet." She was holding a tablet, scanning a report. Anya managed a small smile. "Not yet. Just reorganizing history." She subtly tried to cover her laptop screen, but it was too late. Evelyn's sharp eyes had already caught a glimpse of the complex, brightly colored fractal patterns on Anya's screen, something entirely alien to standard archival work. "What in the world is that?" Evelyn asked, her detached curiosity sharpening into genuine intrigue. She stepped closer, peering over Anya's shoulder. "Is that a multi-dimensional market simulation with predictive fractals?" "Anya, what are you working on?" Anya hesitated. This was her chance, but also a huge risk. Evelyn, though cynical, was intelligent and respected. She had to show her, not just tell her. "It's an extension of my previous report, the one Thorne dismissed. I found something in the historical data. A pattern. It's replicating." Anya explained, quickly and concisely, the fractal nature of market bubbles, how the current one was precisely mirroring past collapses, and how it was far more precarious than anyone realized. She demonstrated her overlaid simulations, showing the terrifyingly accurate prediction of the crash's timing and severity. Evelyn's initial skepticism was palpable. She crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. But as Anya clicked through the simulations, revealing the undeniable mathematical precision of her predictions, a slow, dawning comprehension spread across Evelyn's face. Her eyes, initially narrow with suspicion, widened with a mix of shock and reluctant awe. She saw the elegance of the models, the clarity of the patterns, and the chilling accuracy of the projections. She was witnessing a talent far beyond mere data entry, a true unveiling of Anya's extraordinary analytical intuition. This is incredible. Anya, Evelyn murmured, her voice barely a whisper. And terrifying. If this is accurate, then Thorne isn't just being arrogant. He's leading us, and the entire market, off a cliff. Her mind, trained in rigorous quantitative analysis, quickly recognized the implications. This wasn't some flimsy theory. This was data, presented in a way that defied conventional understanding, yet resonated with an undeniable truth. Just then, the archivist, a stooped elderly man named Mr. Henderson, who possessed an almost preternatural ability to sense unauthorized activity, shuffled into their corner. "Ladies, this is the archives. Quiet contemplation, please, and no unauthorized software on company terminals." His eyes, however, weren't on their screens, but on the small, almost imperceptible shift in Evelyn's usually impassive demeanor. He was an observer, and he noticed everything. He wasn't the kind to betray, but he was the kind who would note. Evelyn, snapping back to corporate reality, quickly straightened. "Right. Mr. Henderson, just a quick consultation on an old file. Nothing to worry about." She gave Anya a swift, intense look, a silent message passing between them. "Anya, come to my lab after hours tonight. Bring everything. We need to run these models on our high-end servers. Verify them properly. Don't tell anyone." Anya nodded, a surge of cautious hope blossoming in her chest. She had found a reluctant ally, a first crack in Thorne's impenetrable wall. Meanwhile, back in his opulent office, Elias Thorne was riding a wave of self-congratulation. News of his dismissal of Anya's report had reached him, and he chuckled to himself. Young, inexperienced, and clearly unsuited for the big leagues. He mused to his executive assistant, who merely nodded blandly. Thorne was deeply invested in his own narrative of unassailable financial genius. He was already preparing for the quarterly earnings report, which he intended to spin as a triumphant vindication of his aggressive investment strategies, particularly the Perseus portfolio. He had instructed David Chen to optimize the financial projections for the upcoming report, using aggressive accounting practices to inflate current valuations and downplay any underlying weaknesses. He had also pushed through several last-minute, high-risk acquisitions, designed to artificially pump up Ether Capital's asset base just before the report's release. These were calculated moves, not just to maintain profits, but to secure massive personal bonuses and to further cement his image as a visionary CEO, regardless of the long-term consequences. He planned to exit some of his more volatile positions after the earnings report, leaving the firm and unsuspecting investors holding the bag when the inevitable crash came. He was meticulously laying the groundwork to shift the blame, to attribute any future market downturn to unforeseen external forces, not his own recklessness. The thought of Anya's absurd fractal patterns was amusing, almost quaint. She was a nuisance, easily dealt with. He already had his counter-narrative ready. He chuckled, confident in his untouchable power, completely oblivious to the quiet storm brewing in the archives, and the unlikely alliance that had just formed. The cold precision of Evelyn Reed's lab after hours was a world away from the dusty quiet of the archives. Here, amidst humming servers and flickering data displays, Anya felt a surge of exhilarating dread. Evelyn, meticulous and reserved, had put Anya's models through every conceivable stress test, cross-referencing them with proprietary real-time data feeds that Anya, as a low-level analyst, had never had access to. The results were chillingly consistent. The fractal patterns held. The impending market crash, amplified by the Perseus portfolio's reckless leverage, was not a theory. It was a mathematical certainty. "It's undeniable," Evelyn murmured, her voice stripped bare of its usual cynicism, replaced by a deep-seated alarm. She stared at the projections, her face illuminated by the cold glow of the monitors. The scale of this. Thorne's leveraged ether so dangerously. He's going to crater the market, Anya, and drag countless innocent investors down with him. This isn't just ether capital. This is systemic, the arena for this impending catastrophe. Anya knew was less a physical place and more a symbolic stage. It was the quarterly earnings report, scheduled for the very next day. This wasn't just a routine financial disclosure. It was a high-stakes performance, orchestrated by Elias Thorne, designed to reassure investors, inflate stock prices, and project an image of unassailable success for Ether Capital. The event was to be held at the prestigious New York Stock Exchange building, a temple of finance where the fate of global markets was often decided. Hundreds of institutional investors, financial journalists, and industry heavyweights would be present, hanging on Thorne's every word. It was precisely where Anya had been dismissed, where her warnings had been scoffed at, and where Thorne intended to deliver his triumphant, yet ultimately fraudulent, narrative. Anya felt the immense weight of that impending moment. "We have to stop him. Evelyn, before tomorrow morning. People need to know." Evelyn, however, was already retreating into her shell of pragmatism. "How? Anya Thorne has everyone locked down. He controls the narrative, the data, even the internal channels. We go to the SEC. It's weeks of investigation, and the market will have already crashed. We go to the press. They'll dismiss us as disgruntled employees, especially with your recent reassignment. Thorne's public relations machine is impenetrable." She paced the lab, her movements agitated. "He's already been pushing out bullish statements for weeks. The market's primed to believe him. Your models are unorthodox. Anya, they're brilliant, but they don't fit the established narrative. They can be explained away as theoretical anomalies." Her words painted a grim picture of Anya's utter solitude. Thorne had meticulously sealed every avenue of official recourse. He had already spread subtle rumors about Anya's unconventional methods and overactive imagination within the firm, subtly eroding her credibility. David Chen, though perhaps internally conflicted, was now actively avoiding her. The reporter she had attempted to contact after her initial dismissal had indeed stopped returning her calls, likely fed a carefully constructed counter-narrative by Thorne's PR team. Even Evelyn, her newfound, reluctant ally, was clearly hesitant to risk her own distinguished career by openly defying Thorne. The vast, intricate network of financial power was closing ranks, leaving Anya isolated, with only her conviction and her grandfather's cryptic notebook as companions. The pressure mounted with terrifying speed. News channels were already buzzing with anticipation for Ether Capital's earnings report. Financial pundits speculated wildly about Thorne's next masterstroke. Thorne himself appeared on various morning shows, radiating confidence. His pronouncements about Ether's unprecedented growth and resilient portfolio echoing through every media outlet. Each confident soundbite, each optimistic projection, felt like a spike driven deeper into the heart of the truth Anya held. Anya knew the market's collapse was a matter of hours, not days. Her models, refined with Evelyn's high-powered servers, showed the specific indicators that would trigger the cascade. The market would begin to unravel within minutes of the opening bell on the next trading day, long before any traditional investigation could even begin. Thorne's strategy was clear: ride the inflated wave, make his final, grand pronouncement, and then discreetly liquidate his most vulnerable positions, leaving the wreckage for others to sort out. The time constraint was suffocating. She had less than 24 hours to somehow expose the truth, to warn the world, before billions of dollars, and the dreams of countless ordinary people, evaporated into thin air. "We need to go public," Anya stated, her voice quiet but resolute, breaking the tense silence in Evelyn's lab. Not through official channels, not through traditional media. Evelyn stared at her. What are you suggesting? Anya, a press conference in the street. Anya shook her head, her mind racing, recalling fragments of conversations with her old college roommate, a gifted but eccentric hacker who had moved into ethical security research after a brief, rebellious stint in black hat hacking. His name was Ben Carter, and he had taught her the rudiments of digital penetration testing, how to identify vulnerabilities in systems, how to move unseen through the digital ether. He had always emphasized that the strongest firewalls had human weaknesses. No, Anya said, her eyes fixed on Evelyn. We need to hit Thorn where he lives, digitally. We need to expose his lie live, in front of everyone who matters. During his earnings report, it's the only way to get ahead of the crash. Evelyn's eyes widened in disbelief, then narrowed with a mix of fear and dawning comprehension. You're talking about hacking a live broadcast or infiltrating Ether's network to push information to a public feed. Anya, that's illegal and impossible. Ether's security is ironclad. Not impossible, Anya countered, her voice gaining strength. My grandfather taught me to see patterns others miss. Ben taught me that every system, no matter how ironclad, has a back door, a human element. Thorn's arrogance is his biggest vulnerability. He's so focused on controlling the visible narrative. He's overlooked the digital whispers, the data he thinks is irrelevant, the small, hidden vulnerabilities. She pulled out her worn notebook, flipping to a page filled with cryptic notes about system architecture and network vulnerabilities, scribbled after late-night conversations with Ben. It contained a seemingly insignificant detail, a rarely used, unsecured backdoor into Ether Capital's auxiliary network, typically used for legacy data transfers, forgotten in the zeal for new, flashy security. Evelyn, a quants expert, immediately recognized the elegant simplicity of Anya's observation. It wasn't brute force hacking, it was exploiting a systemic oversight, a blind spot born of corporate hubris. Even if you could get in, what would you do? Just flash a chart. Not just a chart, Anya said, a fierce determination hardening her gaze, a direct, undeniable comparison. My fractal model, overlaid on Thorn's actual, unmanipulated data, predicting the exact moment of the market's collapse. And I'll highlight the discrepancies between his public statements and Ether Capital's true financial health. It would be a digital and financial mic drop, a direct contradiction that would expose his lies for all the world to see. Evelyn still looked terrified, but a glimmer of intellectual admiration, and perhaps a flicker of moral indignation, shone in her eyes. She was type B, the misguided, driven by caution and self-preservation, but also by an underlying respect for truth and data. She believed in the numbers, and Anya's numbers were irrefutable. Anya, if we do this, if you do this, your career is over. You could face serious charges. Thorn will make sure of it. My career is already over. Evelyn, Anya retorted, a bitter smile playing on her lips. Thorn saw to that when he banished me to the archives. But what about all those people whose life savings are tied to Ether Capital? What about the pension funds? The small investors, their careers, their livelihoods, their futures are about to be obliterated by his greed. I won't let that happen if I can stop it. Her voice was low, but radiated an unyielding resolve. Evelyn stared at her, then at the glowing monitors, where Anya's models predicted the imminent crash with chilling precision. The sheer scale of the financial devastation that Thorn's negligence would unleash was undeniable. Evelyn, a woman who lived by data, could not ignore the data. All right, Evelyn said, her voice barely a whisper. A monumental decision made. I won't help you hack the system. That's too far for me. But I'll verify your data, cross-reference it with every real-time feed I have, and I'll prepare a summary, a concise breakdown of your findings, in a format that can be easily understood by the public. If you can get it in front of the right eyes, or screens, it needs to be irrefutable. And I'll be watching. I'll make sure the world sees it if you succeed. It was her version of a save the cat moment, a quiet commitment to justice within the bounds of her own cautious nature. The plan was audacious, bordering on suicidal. Anya knew the risks. If she failed, she would be utterly ruined, possibly facing criminal charges. But as she walked out of Evelyn's lab and into the pre-dawn chill of Manhattan, the city's skyscrapers looming around her like silent giants, she felt a strange sense of calm. The solitary burden of her knowledge had found a sliver of support. The market, the very system that had dismissed her, was about to become her final, most perilous test. The clock was ticking. The fluorescent hum of her apartment's kitchen light seemed deafening in the pre-dawn quiet. Anya sat at her small table, a mug of cold coffee forgotten beside her laptop. The screen glowed with the complex, pulsing graphs Evelyn had helped refine, each line and curve screaming the imminent market collapse. The New York Stock Exchange would open in just under 2 hours. Elias Thorne's quarterly earnings report, his carefully constructed edifice of lies, would begin even sooner. Broadcast live from a dedicated studio within the NYSE building, this was her gauntlet, her ultimate test. The grand stage of finance, the very place that had dismissed her as an irrelevant cog, was about to become the battleground for truth. Her plan, born of desperation and honed by a hacker friend's forgotten lessons, was audacious. She intended to exploit a known, yet rarely acknowledged, vulnerability in the NYSE's ancillary network, typically used for less critical data feeds and internal communications during live broadcasts. It was a backdoor, as Ben had called it, often overlooked in the race for cutting-edge front-end security. If she could gain access, she could potentially overlay her own data, her own irrefutable charts, directly onto the live broadcast feed of Thorne's presentation. It was a long shot, a digital tightrope walk over an abyss of legal repercussions, but it was the only way to get the truth out before it was too late. The loneliness of her stand was a heavy cloak. Evelyn, though a reluctant ally, had made it clear she couldn't directly participate in anything illegal. She had provided the verified data, the ironclad evidence, but the act of infiltration, the moment of defiance, was Anya's alone. She had called her old college roommate, Ben, but he was unreachable, on a remote cybersecurity assignment in Southeast Asia. She thought of her grandfather, his weathered face, his quiet wisdom. The market has a breath. Anya, listen to it. She gripped the worn leather notebook, its pages filled with his arcane symbols, drawing strength from his unwavering conviction. No one else truly understood the patterns she saw, the urgency she felt. This was her cross to bear, her solitary burden. The pressure of time was a physical weight on her chest. Every minute that ticked by was a beat closer to the market's opening bell, a beat closer to the catastrophic implosion she knew was inevitable. News channels flashed headlines about Ether Capital's highly anticipated earnings. Financial pundits gushed about Thorne's visionary leadership, completely oblivious to the impending disaster. Anya could almost hear Thorne's self-satisfied pronouncements, his carefully rehearsed platitudes, echoing in the air, a prelude to financial ruin. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, damp with sweat. She opened a secure terminal, her heart hammering against her ribs. The screen flickered with lines of code, an alien language to most, but a familiar melody to Anya. She began to type, her movements precise, methodical, each keystroke a prayer. She navigated through firewalls, bypassed antiquated security protocols, and exploited the obscure vulnerability her friend had once described. It was like moving through a complex, shadowy maze, each turn a gamble, each successful bypass a tiny victory. The air in her small apartment crackled with tension, the only sounds the whirring of her laptop's fan and the frantic rhythm of her own breathing. Meanwhile, at the New York Stock Exchange, Elias Thorne, radiating an almost palpable aura of self-importance, prepared for his moment in the spotlight. He paced the plush green room, adjusting the knot of his silk tie, his mind already rehearsing the triumphant tone he would adopt. He had painstakingly crafted the earnings report, ensuring every figure glowed with optimistic projections. Every potentially damaging detail was buried under layers of financial jargon. He even had a backup plan for a discreet sell-off of his more volatile personal holdings, designed to mitigate his own losses in the inevitable downturn he privately anticipated, while leaving the majority of investors to face the music. His public facade was impeccable. His private calculations were ruthlessly self-serving. He saw the world as a game, and he was always playing to win. The interview began. The bright lights of the studio flared, illuminating Thorne's confident, charismatic face. He settled into his chair, a picture of corporate power and success. The anchor, a seasoned financial journalist named Marcus Thorne, no relation, but a longtime admirer of Elias's aggressive strategies, began with a fawning introduction. Anya watched on a smaller screen on her laptop, her connection to the live broadcast now established. Her fingers moved faster, her focus absolute. She was on the precipice, attempting to inject her data, her truth, into the heart of Thorne's carefully controlled narrative. The auxiliary network, surprisingly, offered a direct conduit to the broadcast's overlay system, a legacy interface from a simpler era of television. Just as Anya was about to execute the final command to push her data live, Marcus Thorne, leaning forward with a conspiratorial smile, posed a question designed to allow Elias to hit a grand slam. Mr. Thorne, with Ether Capital's exceptional performance and this phenomenal earnings report, what is your outlook on the broader market? Should investors be confident? Elias Thorne chuckled, a smooth, practiced sound. Marcus, my outlook is unequivocally bullish. The market is robust, innovative, and ripe for unprecedented growth. Ether Capital is leading the charge, poised to deliver exceptional returns. We are, in fact, about to announce a major strategic acquisition that will further cement our position at the forefront of the industry. He paused, a triumphant gleam in his eyes, reveling in the power of his pronouncement. This was his Nintho bated breath moment, the peak of his deception, designed to create a final surge of investor confidence before his planned retreat. He was about to reveal the merger, a desperate, last-ditch effort to prop up the stock price, knowing full well it was a house of cards. Anya's heart leaped into her throat. This was it. The announcement of a new acquisition meant a massive, immediate, artificial pump to the stock. She had to act now. But as she pressed the final key, a chilling message flashed across her screen. Access denied. Intrusion detected. System lockdown initiated. Ether Capital's advanced security systems, though momentarily bypassed by the legacy backdoor, had finally detected the anomaly. Her connection began to flicker, threatening to sever. Despair, cold and sharp, pierced through her. It was over. She was too late. Thorne would make his announcement. The market would crash, and she would be left with nothing but the bitter knowledge of what could have been. Then, a sudden, almost imperceptible flicker on the live broadcast feed. For a split second, a distorted image of Anya's intricate fractal graph, a terrifying scarlet wave, flashed across the screen, superimposed directly over Thorne's smiling face. It was gone as quickly as it appeared, a ghost in the machine. A ripple of confusion went through the studio. The anchor frowned, glancing at a technician off camera. Anya, in a desperate final act, had managed to push through a single fragmented data packet just before the system slammed shut. It wasn't the full, compelling presentation she had envisioned, but it was a seed. Back in her office at Ether Capital, Evelyn Reed, watching the live broadcast on her massive monitor, caught the fleeting glimpse of that anomalous image. Her sharp, quantitative mind immediately recognized it, a truncated, pixelated version of Anya's fractal model, screaming, "Warning!" Her eyes widened in shock. Anya had actually done it. She hadn't been able to push the full data, but she had sent a signal, a digital distress flare. Evelyn, with newfound urgency, remembered Anya's last-minute contingency if the full data couldn't be uploaded. Anya had arranged for a short, cryptic, pre-coded message to be sent to a specific, obscure financial forum known for its deep-dive, independent analysts. It was a digital canary in the coal mine. Now, Evelyn activated her own secure channel, using her powerful servers to amplify and verify the fragmented data Anya had managed to transmit. She quickly cross-referenced it with the true hidden financials of the Perseus portfolio she had secretly downloaded, preparing a direct, concise message for this specific forum. At the New York Stock Exchange, as Thorne continued his confident monologue, Marcus Thorne, the anchor, noticed his earpiece buzzing frantically. "We're getting some strange activity on the network. Mr. Thorne, might be a glitch." Then, a single sharp beep echoed through the studio, cutting across Elias Thorne's confident pronouncements. On the large, dynamic market display board behind Thorne, typically showing live stock prices, a single, flashing red warning appeared, momentarily eclipsing the green up arrows. "Critical systemic vulnerability detected. Immediate market correction imminent." It was a generic system alert, but its timing and prominence were chilling. Someone, somewhere, had triggered it. Elias Thorne's smile froze. He looked over his shoulder at the flashing red text, his face draining of color. The studio technicians scrambled, their faces etched with panic. Marcus Thorne, the anchor, seeing the CEO's sudden distress and the flashing warning, leaned into his microphone, his voice sharp with urgency. "Ladies and gentlemen, we appear to have an unexpected system alert here at the stock exchange. A critical systemic vulnerability. This is highly unusual. We are seeing some immediate market instability warnings." Simultaneously, on the obscure financial forum, Evelyn Reed's amplified message containing Anya's core, verified data, hit independent analysts, who had been following the odd flicker on the broadcast and the generic NYSE warning, immediately began to dissect it. The speed of the independent network was astonishing. Within minutes, the forum erupted, cross-referencing Anya's fractal model with their own real-time feeds. They confirmed it. The market was teetering on the brink. Elias Thorne's carefully concealed manipulations were laid bare by the raw data. On the trading floor, just below the studio, the first tremors of panic began. Small, independent traders, always the first to sense a shift, saw the anomaly on the screens, heard the anchor's panicked tone, and saw the general market index begin to waver. Then, the first selling orders flooded in. The green arrows on the massive display began to turn red. Elias Thorne, watching in horror as the stock ticker for Ether Capital began to plummet, his acquisition announcement drowned out by the rising murmur of alarm from the floor below, finally understood. His meticulously constructed empire was collapsing, not because of some grand external force, but because of a tiny analyst he had dismissed. His face contorted with a mixture of disbelief, fury, and utter despair. He was losing everything, and he had no one to blame but his own arrogance. Back in her small apartment, Anya watched the unfolding chaos on her screen. The market wasn't just correcting, it was plunging. News channels were flashing breaking alerts. Reporters, moments ago praising Thorne, were now shouting questions about unprecedented market volatility and unverified data anomalies. But through the noise, Anya saw it, the initial tremors, the first panicked sell-offs, were precisely aligning with the curves of her fractal predictions. Her truth, once whispered in solitude, was now screaming across global markets. She saw the faces of the news anchors, previously composed, now etched with confusion and dawning alarm. She saw the images of traders on the floor, their faces shifting from quiet anticipation to shocked horror, the disbelief, then the frantic scrambling, then the outright panic, and then, as the market continued its precipitous descent, a grudging, bewildered acknowledgement of the uncanny accuracy of the unverified data anomaly. The world was finally listening. Anya, the quiet analyst, had done it. She had revealed the truth, and the market, in its brutal, undeniable logic, was providing her vindication. The following hours were a maelstrom of financial chaos and journalistic frenzy. The market crash, initially a ripple of panic, quickly became a tsunami, wiping out billions in mere minutes. News channels, once breathlessly reporting Elias Thorne's bullish pronouncements, now flashed alarming headlines: market meltdown, Ether capital implodes, unverified data anomaly, sparks global sell-off. The unverified data anomaly, a cryptic, fragmented fractal graph that had briefly appeared on live television, became the focus of intense speculation. Financial analysts scrambled to understand its implications, their confident predictions crumbling in the face of an unprecedented downturn. Meanwhile, Elias Thorne's carefully constructed world imploded around him, still in the NYSE studio, his face a grotesque mask of disbelief and fury. He watched in horror as Ether Capital's stock ticker flashed a dizzying descent. His planned strategic acquisition was instantly worthless, his personal fortune evaporating with each plunging point. Before he could even issue a denial or spin a new narrative, federal agents swarmed the studio. The SEC Securities and Exchange Commission, tipped off by a flood of panicked calls and, more critically, by Evelyn Reed's anonymous, highly technical submission to regulatory watchdogs, moved with lightning speed. Thorne was arrested on live television, his disheveled, defeated image broadcast globally. The subsequent investigation was relentless. Thorne's network of financial manipulation, his fraudulent accounting practices, and his ruthless self-serving gambles were meticulously unraveled. David Chen, facing his own ruin, quickly cooperated, detailing Thorne's explicit instructions to optimize reports and downplay risks. The full extent of Thorne's greed and deception was exposed. He had systematically siphoned off funds, engaged in insider trading, and created a house of cards designed to enrich himself at the expense of unsuspecting investors. He was charged with multiple counts of fraud, market manipulation, and reckless endangerment of the financial system. His once impenetrable empire collapsed, his name forever stained with infamy. He lost everything: his reputation, his vast wealth, and his freedom, facing a lengthy prison sentence. For Anya, the aftermath was a surreal blur. Her small apartment became a magnet for reporters, though she consistently refused to give interviews, letting the truth of the market speak for itself. Evelyn Reed, her face still etched with the intensity of the past hours, arrived at Anya's doorstep that evening. She looked exhausted, but resolute. "They've arrested Thorne," Evelyn said, her voice hoarse, "and the SEC is poring over all of Ether's records. Your models, Anya, they were chillingly accurate. Everything." She sank onto Anya's worn sofa, pulling out her tablet. I amplified your signal. The fragmented data. I sent it to a few independent forums, along with a summary. They ran with it. They saw it. It's what broke through the noise." Evelyn's eyes, usually so guarded, met Anya's with a raw honesty. "I was a fool not to believe you sooner. Anya, I let my caution, my cynicism, blind me to the truth. I'm sorry." Anya simply nodded, her gaze softening. She knew Evelyn's apology was genuine, born of deep remorse. "It's okay, Evelyn. We did what we could." The vindication, when it came, was not a singular event, but a gradual unfolding. The fragmented fractal graph, the unverified data anomaly, became shorthand for Anya's prescient warning. Independent financial analysts, initially bewildered, began to piece together the truth, hailing the anonymous source of the data as a financial savant. It wasn't long before her name, quietly leaked by a grateful Evelyn Reed, began to circulate. The true new calm began weeks later. The dust settled, leaving behind a scarred but humbled market, a new investment firm. Veritas Investments, its name Latin for truth, emerged from the ashes of the crash, founded by a consortium of ethically minded institutional investors who had narrowly avoided ruin thanks to Anya's implicit warning. Veritas was built on principles of transparency, integrity, and responsible market analysis. They approached Anya with an unprecedented offer, the role of Chief Global Market Research Officer. This was more than just a job. It was a profound opportunity. It came with significant compensation, a spacious office overlooking Battery Park, and, most importantly, unfettered access to the most powerful analytical tools and market data available. She would lead a team of brilliant, ethical analysts, free to pursue unconventional models and challenge prevailing wisdom. It was a chance to apply her unique talent on a global scale, not just for profit, but to build a more stable, transparent, and ethical financial future. Anya accepted, feeling a deep sense of purpose. This was the meaningful opportunity she had always craved, a chance to truly make a difference. Weeks after the chaos subsided, Anya and Evelyn found themselves sharing coffee at a quiet, unassuming cafe in the West Village, a world away from the gleaming towers of finance. Evelyn, having openly condemned Thorne's practices and praised Anya's foresight, had faced some backlash within Ether Capital, but emerged with her reputation enhanced, ultimately joining Veritas Investments as head of quantitative strategy. Still feels like a dream, doesn't it? Evelyn mused, stirring her coffee. One day you're stuck in archives, the next you're shaping global financial policy. Anya smiled. A genuine, unburdened smile. More like a waking dream, but a good one. The nightmares about crashing markets have finally stopped. She paused, thoughtfully. You know, Evelyn, my grandfather always said the market has a breath, a rhythm. You just have to listen. Evelyn nodded slowly. I used to think it was all algorithms and predictable variables. I dismissed anything that didn't fit the model. Your model. It was different. It was listening to that breath. She looked at Anya, a flicker of admiration in her eyes. You taught me to see beyond the numbers, Anya, to trust intuition, even when it defies conventional wisdom. That's a rare gift. And you taught me how to make that intuition undeniable. Evelyn, Anya responded, a warmth spreading through her. You gave it the scientific rigor it needed to be heard. We made a good team. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the soft murmur of conversations and the gentle clinking of cups providing a tranquil backdrop. Anya felt a profound sense of peace. The storm had passed. The truth had emerged. And she, the once invisible analyst, had not only saved countless livelihoods but had also, finally, found her own voice, her own true place in the vast, complex world of finance. It was a new calm, built on the foundations of integrity and courage, ready for the future. 3 years later, the scars of the great market crash had largely healed, not through forgetfulness, but through a collective resolve to build something stronger, more transparent. The towers of Manhattan still gleamed, but their foundations felt more secure, underpinned by a renewed emphasis on ethics and accountability. At the heart of this transformation stood Anya Sharma, no longer the unseen analyst, but a figure of considerable influence and quiet authority in the global financial landscape. Her office at Veritas Investments, perched high above Battery Park, offered a sweeping panorama of New York Harbor, a view that often reminded her of the vast, interconnected world her work now impacted. The space itself was a testament to her principles, bright, open, and filled with state-of-the-art analytical tools, yet softened by a scattering of vibrant green plants and a small, framed photograph of her grandfather. His gentle, knowing smile a constant source of inspiration. Her old, worn leather-bound notebook, once a secret solace, now lay openly on her desk, a cherished artifact rather than a hidden shame. Its cryptic diagrams, once dismissed, were now studied by a new generation of analysts eager to learn from her unique approach. Under Anya's leadership, Veritas Investments had not just thrived, it had become a beacon of ethical finance. The firm was renowned for its responsible investment strategies, consistently outperforming the market not through reckless gambles, but through meticulous, data-driven foresight. Anya's uncanny ability to identify emerging patterns and predict market shifts, rooted in her grandfather's unconventional theories and refined by her own rigorous methodology, was now legendary. She cultivated a team of brilliant, dedicated analysts, many of them young, diverse minds eager to challenge conventional wisdom and restore integrity to the industry. Evelyn Reed, her once skeptical ally, now served as her trusted head of quantitative strategy, their working relationship a testament to the power of shared purpose and redeemed trust. Their collaboration, once born of crisis, was now a seamless symphony of intuition and rigorous analysis. Anya's life, once defined by solitude, had blossomed into a rich tapestry of professional fulfillment and personal connection. She had traded her small Queens apartment for a spacious loft in the financial district, its large windows offering a constant, breathtaking view of the city that had once almost consumed her. Her evenings were no longer spent in quiet isolation, but often collaborating with her team, attending industry conferences, or enjoying quiet dinners with Evelyn and other colleagues who had become genuine friends. The hum of her home office, now filled with the gentle glow of multiple monitors, felt less like work and more like a vibrant extension of her passion. Yet, Anya knew that her true purpose extended beyond the confines of Veritas Investments. Her experience had taught her a profound lesson: that knowledge, especially financial knowledge, was power, and that too many individuals lacked the tools to navigate the complex economic landscape. Inspired by her grandfather's unacknowledged genius and her own journey from obscurity, she founded Financial Literacy for All, a nonprofit initiative dedicated to democratizing financial education. The program provided free, accessible financial literacy courses to underserved communities and high schools across the country. Anya personally oversaw the curriculum development, ensuring it was practical, engaging, and demystified complex financial concepts. She believed that empowering individuals with knowledge was the most effective way to protect them from the kind of predatory practices that had almost devastated the market. She often taught introductory workshops herself, patiently explaining budgeting, investing basics, and the importance of critical thinking when faced with misleading financial claims. She saw herself not just as an analyst, but as an educator, a bridge between the arcane world of finance and the everyday lives of ordinary people. Anya became a sought-after speaker, regularly addressing students at top universities like the Wharton School and appearing at international financial conferences. Her speeches were powerful, delivered with quiet conviction, devoid of the corporate jargon that often plagued the industry. She shared her story, not as a narrative of personal heroism, but as a cautionary tale and a call to action. She emphasized the paramount importance of ethics and integrity in finance, urging the next generation to use their talents not just for personal gain, but for the greater good. Every number tells a story, she would tell her audiences, and it's our responsibility to ensure that story is one of truth, not deception. Courage isn't just about making bold moves, it's about standing firm in your convictions, even when the tide is against you. On a crisp autumn morning, Anya stood on her balcony, a steaming mug of chai in her hands, looking out at the waking city. The financial district hummed with renewed energy, its glass towers catching the golden light of the rising sun. The markets had fully recovered, stronger and, hopefully, wiser than before. The New York Stock Exchange building, visible in the distance, no longer evoked the cold dread of a looming disaster, but a sense of hard-won victory. She smiled, a deep, contented smile. The city below, once a labyrinth of unseen dangers, now felt like a vibrant, breathing entity, its pulse stronger, its future more secure. She closed her eyes for a moment, feeling the cool breeze on her face, the warmth of the mug in her hands. Her grandfather's whisper, once a distant echo, was now a clear, resonant voice within her. You listened, Anya, and you made them listen too. She opened her eyes, gazing out at the endless possibilities of the new day. and the bright, inspiring future she was helping to build. One truth, one voice, one informed individual at a time. If this story stirred your heart, if it reminds you that courage can alter destinies and that light always finds a path even in the deepest darkness, please leave a comment. Share this story with those who need inspiration. Like, subscribe, and hit the bell to never miss our upcoming stories.